Hey, this is Tyler White with TJack Survival. Today we're going to talk to you about sharpening. All right, so I've done a couple videos on sharpening. Most of them have been like Scandinavian grind, Scandi flat grind, or convex grind. Not a lot of them have really been natural whetstones or field sharpening, but I want to kind of cover that today. So Gabriel with Natural Whetstone Sharpening reached out to me and sent me this little gem right there and that little guy there as well. This is a nice little necklace sharpening stone that you can use if you want. It's also nice to, like, I've got an anorak with a D-ring on the inside, attach that and leave it in my pocket so it's not gonna like fall out and get lost. The string's nice for a couple reasons. So let's just talk first about sharpening. Well, sharpening, first off, you have multiple different cuts or grinds of knives. Now I've got this really nice LT Wright knife here, and if you can see here, it's got one grind and then it's got a second grind. So on this knife, sharpening just means removing steel and bring it back to a point. So I'm basically removing it on that small grind. Now I personally like to take these two angles and blend them together. I would essentially turn this micro grind into a convex grind on a lot of my knives. And that's why I have this knife today, is to kind of show you a little bit of how to do that process. Another version of a grind, this little handmade knife I got from Colombia. It's a Tanimboka knife. This is an awesome neck knife, one of my favorites. And it's a flat Scandinavian. I'm gonna go with that, Scandinavian. It's a flat Scandinavian grind with a little bit of a micro convex on the bottom. That's a good setup, I think, because you get the ability to slide along the grain with the Scandinavian grind and the thinness of the knife in combination with the robust blade edge, which you get from a convex grind. So if you have a Scandinavian grind, or even a micro grind, if you can imagine my arm as being part of the knife, that Scandinavian grind, that angle will give you the strength on the tip. But too much shallow of an angle and the tip rolls, too fat of an angle and it's like pushing a snowplow through wet snow. So you gotta find a nice balance. And the difference between a Scandinavian grind, which is straight the whole length, and a Scandi grind or a flat ground with a micro grind is you've got 1 and 2 angles. So what I like to do is to kind of take this ridge line off and round it just a little bit so it's one big grind that drops just a little bit at the tip. It's my personal preference. I talked to 2 large knife manufacturers and they said the convex grind, 2 separate manufacturers, the convex grind that they have on something like this Bark River knife gives you 300% more strength at the tip. And let's talk about that. So this knife, this Bark River knife, has debarked 17 to 20 something lodgepole pine to create a teepee. It has seen some crazy work. And the only piece of problem I can see is just a little touch of a roll right there, and who knows what I did to that. But that's kind of a one-off piece of empirical evidence that a convex grind does amazing things. Like a convex grind is very, very strong, especially when I basically hammered it through limbs and stuff on 17 different, I think I can remember, 17 or 20 different poles that I did to make a teepee. Now I'll compare that to this Scandinavian grind. This is a Skogum bush tool. This thing has seen some work. I took this up to Canada. I used it at the Karamat Wilderness Waves. I was up for about a week, and we just abused this knife constantly, 12 hours a day. I made buck saws, and I made bow drills and hand drills, and carved 2 full sets of ski shoes, and just did some massive work with this thing. And I have touched it up because it did not roll at all in the course in Canada. But when I got home, I thumped it on some oak way too hard and just barely nicked it. I think there was a rock in the joint of the oak, and I had to adjust a little bit. But to show you how this works, this is a flat Scandi grind from the base to the tip right here. Okay, and you can kind of see, I haven't quite cleaned it up all the way, but there's a little bit of a rolling right there. So what's happening with the rolling is you've got a nice flat edge and then something dense. Okay, so it looks like this. And essentially what you've got to do is grind it all flat and then bring the steel back until it's level. So if I have an axe, right, and on a micro level, I have a bunch of these little folded over chunks of steel, and I dent some of them in. Now I have these high parts on the front and the back, and if I grind them flat and then bring those wide edges level, that's how I can repair it. Sometimes if it's just a small roll, then I can just slide the steel off of both sides. Let's say this is my sharp point and my flat point, and I can grind the steel off of these both sides until they come back into alignment, and it brings the center back. So if you really pound it hard, like you put your axe into a rock, you're gonna have to just flatten that whole thing off and then take steel away to reset it. But if you just barely bump a nick, and all I mean is just enough so that you can barely see it with your eyes, then you can successfully repair that by just removing steel until it resets itself. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to sharpen a Scandi grind. I'm gonna show you how to sharpen something with a micro bevel on it. And I am going to also redo this ridiculously beat up fillet knife that I actually used the tip of to jump start an engine and blew the steel off. So let's get started. One thing that's unique about this setup specifically is the hardness of the stone, okay? I'm used to using, well, when I grew up, we got an Arkansas soft stone. You spit on it, you sharpen your knife, you drove on, right? And eventually that Arkansas soft stone starts to make kind of like a bow that you're sliding down. And what that does is it kind of rounds even more substantially your tip. And eventually you've got this fat, again, shovel pushing through wet snow. Just lots of resistance, and it wedges it apart more so than cuts it. And when you're using a Scandinavian grind, a flat ground, like a nice world-class one like this Skog and Bush tool, you want that to remain straight and flat, because the goal is to cut across and then separate the fibers, as opposed to like wedging and blowing them apart, because then you have unstraight cuts and lines that are really hard to deal with. So one value to having a hard natural whetstone like this is it's gonna take me a generation before I start to go create any kind of bowing, because this is such a hard stone that it's gonna take more steel off than stone. The other thing that's good to note is this is a smoother side. I'm gonna call this like a 20,000 grit. I don't know what it is, but it's a very, very high polishing level grit. And then he's got a rough cut side. And those lands and grooves are gonna remove fibers, if you will. They're not really fibers, but little chunks of steel off at a greater rate. If I want to use this Skog and Bush tool on this whetstone, get a little bit wet, right? And then I'm just gonna push and chase it. So on the Skog and Bush tool, what I want to do is I can feel this flat grind, and I need to feel the actual bevel or the cut itself. And I tip it down until it touches. And I'm actually put my finger on the front because I've never cut myself, just don't slide the blade forward into it. And then while putting pressure on this side and that side, I'm gonna push it forward and slide it to the right. And what's gonna end up happening is it's gonna take off steel on that base piece and then turn. This knife specifically has a continuous angle. There's no like straight angle followed by an arc. It's a continuous arc from the base to the tip, which is one of the elements that Morse Kohansky, whose ideas created this knife, wanted, is a continuous curve, which caused it to arc cut from the front to the back. And the reason why that's valuable, let me shut this off. The reason why that's valuable is that you get a draw cut from the back up from the bottom of the knife all the way to the top, as opposed to a push cut with the draw cut in the front. It's just a characteristic that he wanted. But understanding that means that you have to not go straight, but at a slight angle, draw, cut it as you pull it from back to front. And usually what I'll do is I'll do 10 in one direction, flip it over, and I'll do 10 in the other direction. If you can hear that, that is small bits of steel being polished or removed. Okay, so I'll pull, got one angle, got the second angle, I pull and draw. So I'll do 10, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8, 7, 7, until I get down to where I'm doing 1, 1, 1. This knife's already sharp, so I'm not gonna put a huge amount of work into it, but I'll do 1 there, then pull back. Sometimes I like to put rubber or sticky on the bottom of it. Wasn't quite a good flow. Anyway, you'll get to the point where you're removing steel and you can see it in the fact that that water will change color. As you get to the point where I am now, where you can kind of see there's a bit of a deeper grain removal on the blade, and you want to start polishing it up just a little bit. Then you can start using the smoother side. And that kind of flows a lot more. The problem is you got to like double your strokes. So you might need to do 20, 20, 19, 19, and continue until you get to the point that you want. Now, if you're just touching it up and you just do a straight 1, sounds beautiful. I don't know if you can hear that. Put my speaker down there, see if you can hear it. It gets to a point, put my mic back, gets to a point where you've got a tip with a little bit of fluff on the top. And that fluff is called a burr. And it will roll to the left when you sharpen it on this side, and then it will roll to the right and left and right and left and right. And essentially what you've done is you've cut the steel until it starts to bunch up, right? And then you do it on the other side. Once that burr is removed, once you go to the point that you get a burr and then remove the burr, you know that you've dealt with all of the low valleys along the blade edge. You can do 99% of the work with the stone in the beginning and then just dust it off with a strop. So a leather strap or a strop is a burr removing tool. So if you can imagine, I can feel it. I haven't really got too much. There's a little bit of a burr on the base, not really any on the top. But if you can imagine, right here it's just got a little bit of steel hanging off the back side of it. So if that burr is on this left side and there's nothing on the right, I want to put the left side down and drag it across some sort of leather to remove it. And basically I'm going to do is the weight of the knife and then just dust it off. What I don't want to do is over push it and grind my tip off that I just built, right? And essentially, I didn't do that very much. Usually I'll do more, but that'll pull that burr right off the base and give you a more substantial cutting ability. Now this knife's already been worked on. It's not the best example. I want to use, okay, this fillet knife, we were out on the lake and the boat stopped and I needed to jump start the boat. So I connected it with the tip of this knife. We jump started the boat, but it electrocuted the tip right off. It just blasted right off of it. So then I left it in the drawer of the kitchen, and it has been like a kitchen knife, getting substantial amounts of abuse ever since then. So you can't see it, but this blade is just hashed and completely torn up. And I thought, well, what a great knife to go and sharpen. So let's sharpen this guy up real quick. I'll slide some of these off, and I also want to kind of re-profile this one well in a little bit. Now, if you flow away from the blade, you're going to introduce a large burr. that's okay in the beginning when you've got valleys, because you need to scrape those valleys up. But as you get that corrected so that you're not cutting holes in the tip of your stone, you then turn and cut into the stone on the top. You're not really cutting into the stone, but you're using the stone to cut the tip of the blade. So I'll start out with this more rough side. These are kind of wet, I can't tell. So I'll start out with this more rough side and do, oh, that's grindy. Because that is a really beat up knife. I can even see one of the valleys right there. Once I've got those valleys removed and I know that I'm not gonna like gorge my stone by cutting forward, then I want to start removing that burr on the tip. And what I'll do again, now it's not a Scandinavian knife where I can hold it on that micro bevel. So I'll put it until the shadow disappears at the micro bevel, and then I know I'm touching all the way to the tip, and then I'll cut the length of the blade. So it goes just like this. Okay. And I'll do that 10-10, 9-9, 8-8 until we're done. Right here you can kind of see a gray area. That is steel shavings that are starting to build up that are removing from the blade. And I can already see it clearing up a lot of that nasty that had happened to it. Okay, I've done enough on both sides. I'm gonna wrap it up with, check down that, that's actually pretty impressive. I'm gonna wrap it up with single strokes. It's fairly sharp in the base here. It needs a little more sharpness on the right, or the arc. And all I'm doing is I'm feeling how it snags at my finger. It's a little dull there, extremely sharp right there, and needs a little more work right there. So I'll just put a little more work in the bell and finish off that base, and then we'll be done. All right, now that I've done that, I'm gonna finish it up on the other side, and I can see the reflective parts that have been polished off. If you have any concerns, put a permanent marker on your blade, sharpen it, and if it's not removing the permanent marker, then you know you've missed a spot. But you can, when you get better at it, you can sit and watch it. So you can tell just by looking at it. So I'm gonna finish this off with the polished side, dust it on the strop, and then let's see how it cuts. Sharpen on the back side, sharpen on the front. Took me like 20 minutes max, I think. I'm going to clean this and dust it off real quick with the strop. Now you don't have to use a strop, but it's nice just to final polish and remove anything that's available. And I will start just below the tip of the blade and pull it back like this. Don't jam your blade into it. It's just leather, so you don't want to jack it up. Sharpen on the back side, sharpen on the front. Took me like 20 minutes max, I think. I'm going to clean this and dust it off real quick with the strop. Now you don't have to use a strop, but it's nice just to final polish and remove anything that's available. And I will start just below the tip of the blade and pull it back like this. Don't jam your blade into it. It's just leather, so you don't want to jack it up. Okay, here's a moment of truth. I struggled to cut meat with this thing. I struggled to cut anything with this thing. So, ooh, that's impressive. So we're gonna see what it does. My basement's under construction, so I've got this piece of paper here. Let's see how she cuts. Wow. Ripping a little bit, but not the best paper. This is an old sticker. I never tried to cut an old sticker. As you can see, it pulls little pieces right off of it. I've often said if you can make curlies with your knife on a piece of paper, it's sharp. A lot of people just blast it open. That's just inertia cutting it. But if you're cutting slowly and you curl it up, that's like shaving and cutting between the meat sharp. That is ridiculously sharp. That's impressive. Okay. And I made a mess. There you have it. I have to admit, I was a little bit apprehensive when Gabriel reached out to me and wanted to send me just rough cut stone. I was like, hard rough cut stone, I don't know if that's going to be a good sharpener, because I didn't know. And now that I've used this for a couple months now and shown you how it will clean up a completely abused knife and make it shaving sharp, I think these are quality and worth your time purchasing. Okay. This is the main stone he gave me. This is the next stone. This next stone's super polished. Could be used like art. Could be used as a sharpening stone. If you're in the field and you want to do a field sharpening technique, I'll show you how to hold it without splitting your fingers open. I learned that the hard way a couple of different times. Just hold it right there so that it's below the level, and then you cut at the tip. So it's gonna look like this. And then you pull it back without cutting that other nail. You curl like this. And I will oftentimes kind of cut on the edge. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you can run your knife along a window that's been rolled down, and it'll sharpen that thing right up. And it's not too different from kind of running it along the edge of something like this. Now, you want to use the flat part if you can, but don't worry about a polished edge. And again, I don't want to cut my finger. I don't want to cut my thumb. I was sharpening a hatchet once. My thumb just barely came up to the tip, and I just took the skin right off the tip of it. So make sure when you're holding it, it's below the level. Like if I'm going to hold this stone, figure out where the soft side is, and hold it at an angle to sharpen it, I'll just pull it this way. It's a little bit faster. And another technique I want to throw in really quick too is this knife I'm going to work on today. I don't want to sit here and make you watch me do that the whole time, but it has the primary bevel and it has the secondary bevel. Somewhere just short of the primary bevel is where I'm going to remove that second shelf. And I will just spin on it and then start pulling my angle up until I spin on all the way up to the tip. And this is a little faster way to remove steel if you're trying to get a jump start on this and you don't want to be sharpening all day long, okay? Again, I'll just hold it like this. This is the way my grandpa showed me to do it. Spin it until it's ready. And my grandpa come from the old school utilitarian perspective that this is a tool to process game, to cut your fish, cut your deer, cut twine on a bale, stab in things and abuse. And his knives kind of show that, but he also could get it shaving sharp in minutes because he would just spin it to remove the excess shelf, and then when you're ready, you'll just cut it, get your angle correctly, and I will balance the gap between my finger and that knife to kind of pick the edge that it needs to cut on. So spin and pull until you're ready. All right, guys, I don't know what else to say. This is naturalwhetstones.com. The actual website is right here. Let me say this correctly. naturalwhetstonesharpening.com. That's the website right there. I advise you go check it out. Natural Sharpening Stones. Gabriel J. Warren. Nice kid. I talked with him online for quite a while before we ended up doing this, and he's got his little personal story, talks about how he comes up with the stones and cuts them and stuff. And one thing I want to say to you before I shut this off is, this is a hard stone, which is a good thing. It's fairly smooth, so it's not going to tear your knife up, but this stone is going to last you and your grandkids for a very, very long time. All right, guys, hopefully that was valuable to you. If it was, leave your comments down below. I'll stick his website down there if you want to check it out. If you've got speedy sharpening techniques, let me know. But before I forget, the stuff that I have on this is called Black Magic. It's something from Bark River. It's just like a jeweler's rouge. It's an abrasive grease, essentially. And I know someone's going to ask me that. So anyway, thanks for watching. Leave your comments below. His website's in the bottom. And yeah, these are some outstanding stones. I'm going to use them quite often in the future.